You're watching live coverage from RJD News. Thank you for contributions from viewers like you.
Welcome to RJD News. This is your top stories. France is in horrific chaos after a couple of hundred people were arrested after a protest became violent, and it is still going strong.
Come before you and assume the presidency at a moment rich with promise.
President George Herbert Walker Bush passed away at age 94 on Friday. He will be remembered as a good father, leader, and a speaker as the President of the United States of America. This is RJD News. We're on air. Welcome to RJD News. We start with breaking news in France. France is uprising, and it's kind of bad. It's so terrible that violence has come up so high that the president has said something about it. The president said he will set this as a state of emergency, and France is on lockdown. It started last week from a violent protest, and people began to fight. They began to burn things. They began to become very violent. The uprising kind of reminds me of a time called the French Revolution. They revolted because of tax. Also, in this situation, they voted against tax, and this is something that's serious and we need to fix. Check out the video. As you can see in these pictures, the violent protests have become so terrible that fires have sprung all over the country. Tax is a serious thing, and obviously, people will revolt. The French Revolution was also a revolt against the government because of their tax and because they were poor. Is this a revolt? Is this going to become a new revolution of the French? Will there ever be a Bastille Day anymore? We don't know. France is under attack by its own citizens. This seems like it will be a creative civil war in the new era. This is just devastating for the country and ones around it. After all the country's been through, this is RJD News. I'm Rashid James. We'll be right back.
Come before you and assume the presidency at a moment rich with promise.
President George H.W. Bush has passed away last Friday at the age 94. He was a great and civil man. He was also a funny and comedic man. He went through so much in his life, also being shot down in World War II, and also being saved by a submarine nearby. He's been through so much in his life. He's been a congressman. He's lost many of wars against people in the Senate. This shows his legacy.
I come before you and assume the presidency at a moment rich with promise.
For George Bush, becoming president was the capstone of a lifetime of public service that would also include being the father of a president. In fact, the Bush family has been among the most prominent in American political history. But while George Herbert Walker Bush grew up in wealth and privilege and went to the best schools, he also learned the importance of serving his country. A Navy pilot during World War II, he was shot down over the Pacific and rescued by a passing submarine, the moment incredibly captured on camera. He returned home, married his sweetheart, Barbara Pierce, and started a family, moving to Texas in 1948 to get into the oil business. They suffered the loss of daughter Robin to leukemia, but raised 5 children. In 1964, the year he turned 40, Bush got into politics, running for Senate.
I certainly hope, and I'll bet you do too, that our children can grow up knowing what freedom really is.
He lost, but later won a House seat and ran for Senate again in 1970, this time with help from President Nixon.
And George Bush, in my opinion, is the best man for America.
When he lost again, Nixon appointed him ambassador to the UN.
I consider myself a very lucky guy.
But his next job was chairman of the Republican Party during Watergate.
You try being chairman of the Republican Party during the Watergate days. You talk about a ghastly assignment.
Bush escaped Watergate unscathed, and Nixon's successor, Gerald Ford, made him his envoy to China.
Put it this way, I'm darn happy about it.
Just a year later, an even bigger assignment.
Director of the Central Intelligence Agency.
CIA, I loved. 1 year only, but I just loved it. I loved defending the culture at a time when everybody was down on it.
When Ford lost to Jimmy Carter, Bush left the CIA.
What he will do next, he didn't say.
What he did next was run for president.
I do pledge a new candor.
Bush lost the nomination to Ronald Reagan in 1980, and his political career seemed over until this stunning announcement.
That George Bush be nominated
For 8 years, Bush was Reagan's loyal vice president, surviving questions about his role in the Iran-Contra scandal to become Reagan's heir apparent.
I am here today to announce my candidacy for President of the United States.
Bush emerged from Reagan's shadow.
I want a kinder and gentler nation.
And made a promise he would later break.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
George Bush defeated Democrat Michael Dukakis in 1988 and became President of the United States.
So help me God.
The Bush years saw epic events on the world stage: the Tiananmen Square massacre, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the collapse of the Soviet Union itself.
By the grace of God, America won the Cold War.
But his presidency's defining moment was Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait.
This will not stand, this aggression against Kuwait.
Backed by an international coalition, Bush launched Operation Desert Storm and drove Iraqi forces out.
Aggression is defeated, the war is over.
But Saddam Hussein remained in power until Bush's son toppled him 12 years later.
I thought Saddam Hussein would fall of his own weight when the war ended. And I thought they'd throw him the hell out of there, and they didn't.
Bush's post-war popularity soared, then sank over economic concerns closer to home. In 1992, he lost to Bill Clinton, becoming a one-term president.
I had my chance. I gave service to this country. And now I'm perfectly content to let history be the judge.
George Bush enjoyed an active retirement, full of grandchildren, fishing, even skydiving. And he saw his eldest son become president. But he kept his advice to a minimum, and his son charted his own course. Bush was no stranger to partisan politics, but he aspired to a higher ideal, as when he teamed up with Bill Clinton on global relief efforts.
You can be political opponents and still work together for something more important than your own political future.
A former president for decades, he saw granddaughter Jenna Bush Hager become a Today Show correspondent.
And what's aging like?
Aging's all right, better than the alternative.
He saw Republicans turn away from the Bush brand and the party establishment it represented.
But the simple fact is...
Excuse me, 1 second.
No.
Rejecting son Jeb's bid for the presidency.
So tonight, I am suspending my campaign.
And he survived his wife of 73 years, Barbara Bush, and welcomed an outpouring of affection for her. Theirs was the longest marriage in presidential history. Throughout his long life, George Bush was admired as a man of decency, modesty, and uncommon achievement, values that, to the end, reflected what was most important to him, his family.
I just want to get up into heaven, and I don't get there by bragging on myself. My mother told me that years ago.
What a legacy. The funeral will be held on Wednesday, December 5th, 2018. He will be remembered forever as the 41st President of the United States. That is the end of our episode today. See you all later. Good night. God bless America.